Communications Director and Campaign Coordinator for the Harris County Democratic Party. Also joined by Dr. Christina Hughes, Assistant Professor of Political Sciences at UH Downtown, and Pablo Pinto, Associate Professor and Director of the Center for Public Policy at University of Houston's Hobby School of Public Affairs. All right, so we're caffeinated, ready to go, talk about big picture. Democrats win the House, Republicans retain the Senate, Beto loses, Cruz wins. Let's start there, and let's start with you.
Well, I don't know that it's such a big shock that the Republicans kept the Senate and the Democrats won the House, because I think we had been thinking about that. I think the big shock certainly is the Beto Cruz race, because even though Cruz won, I do think that everyone's going to be a little stunned that it was as close as it was. I know during the night when it first started, it looked incredibly close. It was just surprising. So I do think that's the big story of the night, is just how close it was. Now, it did cost many millions of dollars, but I also think that race actually had a significant impact down the line. So even though it didn't get Beto over the line, I do think it did help down ballot.
Otis, before I get to you, I want to remind folks watching that we are live on click2houston.com, the Facebook page for KPRC Channel 2 News, as well as KPRC's YouTube page. So if you have a comment or a question for the panel, really a question, we invite you to come on and log on and submit your questions, and we'll try to get some of them answered. All right, Otis, how do the Democrats feel about tonight?
Oh, this is tremendous. I'm here to tell everyone, put everyone on notice, Texas is officially a battleground state.
Wait a minute,
John Cornyn,
a battleground?
It is a battleground state. John Cornyn is on notice for 2020. This is tremendous. This is what happens when you do the work. This is what happens when you put candidates on the ballot that relate to people, that talk to their issues. This is what we talked about pre-7 o'clock. Now we're late night, and you saw that down ballot. You saw Lizzie Fletcher, who just won Congressional District 7, and that might have some repercussions in her district down ballot as well. Democrats swept the county. Last time I checked, Democrats are up 10 points with not everybody reporting, and they've been gaining throughout the night. So I believe Texas is a battleground state. I think that now you're going to see money stay in Texas, not leave Texas for Democrats. I think you're going to see more qualified candidates on the ballot. I believe they called Colin Allred up in Dallas as well. He was up big. So it's exciting times right now. It is. And I know Beto fell short, but Beto energized Texas, and that's what we needed him to do. We needed him to cut the margins. We needed him to stay the course, bring some enthusiasm back to a state that hadn't had it in almost 2-3 decades. And that's what we did tonight.
But Pablo, overall, was this the blue wave that Democrats were hoping for? Can you say that honestly?
It was a little wave. You can see that. I mean, it's like enough to take the House. I mean, it's like probably somebody had more expectations that the anti-Trump sentiment would show more strongly in many different races. It did not. But it was enough to take control of the House. I think it energized many, it's like segments of the population that were not voting before, and that could have an impact down the line, as Otis was talking about, especially in battleground states. I mean, it's like the red states became competitive. It's a good time also for pollsters. I mean, it's like they got, hit very badly in the previous cycle. This time, they seem to have gotten it right. I mean, it's like, and I'm looking forward to seeing what goes into the voters that we showed up for the future.
Christina, your thoughts on how things went tonight?
I agree that I think Texas is now probably a battleground state, which is good for both parties. Now we will have maybe, hopefully, a lot of Democratic candidates running in the way down ballot races like the state legislature. Texas, for most of its history, has been dominated by one-party Democrats and then Republicans. For a brief period of time in the 90s, we had kind of almost equal balance in the legislature, and that's when we had some of our best policies. And I think Republicans even represent their constituents better when they have some competition, right, and they have to actually compete for those votes. So if the Democratic Party starts putting money in Texas, especially down ballot, then I think that's good for everybody in Texas.
Marco, you want to push back on this idea of battleground?
Well, yes, I do. I will, because first of all, yes, it's battleground because you got $70 million for Beto's race coming in. That's a huge amount. So those were expensive votes, so they cost a lot of money. However, I'm not going to entirely disagree. There is probably something healthy about having healthy competition, because I do think that it happens to Democrats and it happens to Republicans. when you have too much of a dominance in one party, you do tend to kind of sort of relax a little bit much, and then you may not be as responsive. So if it provokes the Republican Party to be a little more active and proactive in getting votes, I think that's great. But do I think that in 2020 that this is going to turn into a Democrat-wide, a statewide Democrat wins? I don't think so. It was a very expensive race. A lot of that money did come from California and New York. And when 2020 comes out here, they're going to have a lot of decisions as to where to send that money. And at that point, they're going to want to win something. So I don't know. You talked about Battleground Texas. We had that. I heard that in 2016, and of course that battleship sank. So there was nothing there. So I don't think it's battleground yet, but definitely it is a shift to at least making some candidates start thinking about, I can't take it slightly. And I do think that it probably is fair to say that some Republicans took it a little too easy.
Let's talk about this before we move on. What does this mean for Beto O'Rourke's future? A lot of people are already saying, well, now he's free to run for president in 2020.
Beto, what I love about our party, and I think it's trending this way because the party is getting younger, we keep Beto as the lead person in Texas. I don't think he needs to jump ship. I'm a firm believer that you have to carry your state to run for president. If you can't carry your state, don't run for president. That's anybody, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, it doesn't matter. But in Texas, what we need to do is we need to keep someone like Beto in the forefront, keep his face out there, keep young guys energized, because the youth vote is up. I mean, there's a reason why it's a 3-point race right now. I think it'll probably end up being like a 4 or 5 point race, but there's a reason why it's like this, because he's gotten these new voters energized. And Beto will be fine. I'm sure the party nationally will find a place for him. I don't know if he'll necessarily run for the Senate seat in 2020, but his future is definitely bright amongst the Democratic Party.
All right, let's talk about the other big race we had our eye on, and that is Texas House District 7. Lizzie Fletcher defeating incumbent John Culberson. What went wrong for your candidate?
Well, you know, a lot of people, I mean, the Culberson campaign, they knew that things had changed quite dramatically even a year or two ago. They were already talking about the fact that things had changed. And so I don't think that they were entirely surprised that this was going to be a harder fight. That was one of the few areas where I did see a Republican try to be proactive and start trying to broaden their base a little bit. I think that, for example, reaching out to Locke County Republicans for an endorsement was part of that strategy to reach out other minorities as well. You know, that said, though, there's no denying that Lizzie Fletcher ran a very effective campaign, and the PACs that put out the ads, and I saw every morning. I don't know if you guys saw them, but every morning I woke up and I saw lots of ads, and I was impressed with how many there were. There was a lot of money there, and those ads hit hard. I do think that some of the ads were not entirely accurate, but I did see that at the very end, the Culberson campaign did start responding to some of the claims on the previous ads, but I think it was a little too much, a little too little, too late, and so I think it was always a tough race for Culberson from the beginning.
All right, Otis, so I presume you agree for once, perhaps, with Marco?
Yeah, you know, Lizzie did a phenomenal job in that district. You know, let's face it, that district, again, is changing. I mean, gentrification has done a job in that district. The suburbs do not look like what it did 5-10 years ago in that district. And I got to tell you, House District 135, it's probably going to go Sarah Davis's way, but you know, Sarah's a great candidate for the Republican Party. But in that district, they tend to side more with how Lizzie approaches things. I think another thing, too, is that, you know, Culberson got hit hard, and he got hit hard. It's almost like the D-Trip gave Lizzie's campaign an Amex and just said, go to town with the ads. But they hit him hard. I mean, you know, like I said, he's been laxed. He hasn't been visible in that district. You know, and they feel like he hasn't kept his word over the past couple of years. So he finally got a serious challenger. Lizzie ran a great campaign. She fit that district as well. You know, one of the gripes that I've always had with our party, a little inside politics, is that we need to start putting people who fit that district. You can't just go pick up someone to say, oh, here's a huge progressive, go put them in CD7. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. As much as we do, it doesn't. So I think we're starting to understand that. I think we're starting to learn from that, and you're starting to see it not just here in CD7, but you saw it in Virginia, you saw it in Florida. You're starting to see it all over the country. I think Democrats are going back to that old way.
All right, Pablo, this is one of those races that, you know, nationally was getting a lot of attention because it was going to help potentially Democrats take the House. It did. What happens now from here?
So one of the things that we don't have to forget is that the Republican Party lost. I mean, two of their leaders, I mean, in this current, I mean, it's like Texas election, right? I mean, it's like, so we have Sessions, I mean, it's like losing in Dallas. We have Culberson losing in Houston. And that's important. That tells you that, I mean, it's like supposedly an incumbent, especially someone who has a leadership position, should be in stronger grounds. And that tells you that we have to pay attention to the changes that have been going on within these districts in both cases, right? In the more urban, I mean, it's like more populated areas that keep bringing people from all over the country. I mean, it's like, and all over the world. I mean, it's like the biggest drivers of the growth in Houston area are immigration. I mean, it's like international and also from other parts of the country. That is likely to have an impact on the preferences in the district. You need leaders in those districts that are receptive to those messages, and sometimes it's hard when you've been there for such a long time.
Christina, you said Texas 7 is your district. What do you think it was about Lizzie Fletcher's message that got through to specifically, you know, Republican, suburban, perhaps white women who may not have voted for her?
First, I live in a district. It's not suburban. We are Houston city limits. We are not Katy.
Well, let me rephrase that to say Republican women who may have voted for Trump. Maybe did she gain some of those women?
Well, Hillary won that district. So Trump didn't win Congressional District 7. Hillary did. I think we kind of hit on it. Culberson just focused on policy when that district has changed a lot demographically and ideologically. It has gentrified. It's much more international now, much more diverse now, just since in the 20 years that I've lived there. But also, he didn't focus on service. And I've said this, our district was hit really hard by Harvey. The Addicks Reservoir, that went right down Buffalo Bayou, right through the heart of that district. And he wasn't there. And I know he voted for the bill, but they all did. But he wasn't there visible in the district, and he didn't reach out to them. And there are still people who still aren't back in their homes yet. And I think that had a huge impact. Where is he? Why isn't he here helping us out? Why isn't he here even giving us a message? I didn't even get an email, right? And I'm on his email list. And so I'm sure my neighbors didn't get an email either. If I did get an email, it wasn't about Harvey, it was about these other policy things. And so I think he just kind of was absent, and he was too focused on national policies and not focusing on what was important to his district, right? It goes back to all politics is local. He didn't spend enough time on local issues.
Marco, let me ask you, changing subjects, how big of a problem is this democratically controlled House going to be for President Trump?
Actually, it's not going to be as big a problem for Trump as it will be for the Republican Party. One of the things that you know, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but when often referred to President Trump as a political mutant, okay? And by that I mean that he's not like any other politician. You know, you can't just look at him as your standard Republican, because he's not. I think a lot of people, Republicans should be a little concerned, because Trump is not above making bargains with the Democrats to get what he wants. And there are many areas where he actually agrees with the Democrats more than he does with the Republicans, particularly in infrastructure areas. Right. So, you know, I think you said something earlier in the previous segment, you know, something that this is actually can work out for Trump either way. And I think that's true.
But you were talking about earlier as well about, you know, uniting. So are you supportive of your party reaching out to this newly democratically controlled side of the House?
You know, what I would say is this. It's that I always think it makes sense. You know, there's nothing wrong with compromise. A lot of people talk about compromise as a dirty word. Other people say it's surrender, and it's not necessarily either. Sometimes, you know, and you may agree with this, sometimes compromise is not the right thing, right. Okay? Because sometimes it's a core issue. Right. So you don't compromise on that because it's a core issue. But I do think too many people think too many things are core issues. They overdo it. There's not everything's a core issue. Some things are things you can work on. I think infrastructure is one of those. And I think that there probably has been some, sometimes there's a knee-jerk reaction, you know, maybe in our current partisan times, people tend to too often react negatively to the opposite position because they think, oh, I'm about to agree with the opposing party. I can't do that. This actually may open opportunity. So then areas where we haven't been able to work through that maybe the Democrats will. But we'll have to see, because it'll definitely be harder. If they start off with impeachment, that will definitely kill it. I think that
let me bring that up, because Otis, tonight, NBC News reporting that the Democrats are already saying, sources in the Democratic Party are saying they're ready to subpoena President Trump's tax returns. Yep. Is there a danger of losing voters if the Democrats dive right into investigations of the president as opposed to focusing on healthcare and immigration and the economy.
Right. Well, I do want to start off and say that I haven't read any of these reports. I don't want to speculate on what the House Democrats are going to do. They still have to decide who's going to be the chair of these different committees. I will say this: subpoenas everywhere. I think that one of the things that you have to look at is that the American people, when they get polled on this, they're tired of the Russia investigation as well too. So I think that this might be a tremendous opportunity for the House to speed up this process that could have been sped up a long time ago if Devin Nunes and some of these guys in the House wasn't impeding the investigation over and over again. So it's going to be really interesting. I do think that they can maybe meet in the middle on infrastructure. I don't know what the House's play is. Maybe they stall a little bit and see what they can do in 2020. You know, night's not even over and we're already talking about 2020. It's a reality, but I do think that you're going to see some subpoenas. I think people have the right to know where the president is getting his money from, what allegiances has he made, because there's a reason why he's the first president, I believe, or first candidate who didn't release his tax returns. Why? He called for Barack Obama to release his birth certificate. Did it right away. We called for him to release his tax return. Couldn't do it. So it'll be very, very interesting.
Marco, sorry, Pablo, pardon me.
Subpoenas work. I mean, they have worked in the past. I mean, they put, Hillary Clinton in the bullseye. I mean, it's like a couple of years. I mean, it's like on the Benghazi investigation. We know that politicians are likely to go with to that. It is a weapon. I mean, it's like to undermine the credibility of their competitors. So I'm positive that there's somebody in Congress looking forward to doing that. I mean, it's like, and also subpoena is part of the oversight role that Congress has. I mean, it's like, so the president has agencies that he, I mean, it's like delegates activities to. I mean, it's like, and they are all, I mean, subject to, I mean, it's like the will of the people, and that's the role that people put in Congress. So one of the messages that you get here is that people wanted some checks and balances as well, and it's shown in the results. We have a divided government now. Now sit together, resolve the issues.
Christina, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the House isn't going to be able to pass health care and make it through the Senate. They're not going to be able to pass any big policy initiatives because you still have the Senate and the president, right? So I think if you look at the exit polls, most people say when they voted Democrat, it was because they wanted a check on the White House. So that's basically their only role they're going to have for the next 2 years, so the next election.
And healthcare still polled really well in the exit polls as well too.
But, and even there, it's not so much to change healthcare, but it's to keep it.
Yeah.
So as a check to keep it from being repealed, because they can't pass anything, that they're not going to be able to pass any new policies. And I don't think we're going to have a Clinton-Newt Gingrich type of situation where they actually work together and get a lot of policies passed. I don't see that happening.
And to reiterate what we said before, this is a winning proposition for Trump because if he gets things through, right, he wins. He's a statesman that manages to, I mean, it's like bring everybody together. If he doesn't, it's divided government. It's the Democrats in the House not allowing him to push his agenda.
I know we're looking ahead. We've talked about looking ahead to 2020. What do you think the president's chances are for re-election at this point?
Oh, I think he will be reelected. I do think so. And it's not that strange to say because, after all, the same thing happened to Ronald Reagan. He went on to a landslide the second time around, even though he was corrected on the midterms. Same thing with Obama. Actually his second, and same thing with Clinton. Clinton did not even win a majority vote in '92. Then you had the '94 midterms, which swept in the Republicans for the first time, I think, in 34 years. And then Clinton came back in '96 to win more at a higher level than he did before. So it's what I said, again before, is people tend to overread these elections as meaning more than they actually mean. There is the element of correction, there is that. But we always have to remember there's only two choices, and people are always having to dither between those two. And those same people that voted Trump one day, they say, well, you know what, now I kind of want to check on Trump today. That may change back again in 2020. I think a lot's going to ride in terms of now, one of the things about winning an election, of course, and you guys know this, is that now it's on you a little bit. Okay, because now you can't just say, well, whatever goes wrong, it's your fault. You have to. Now you start owning the result. And as far as these investigations are concerned, people say they're tired of it. It's 2 years. I think if the Democrats can do this quickly, maybe they're okay. But if there's just investigation and subpoena, and it just goes on, and nothing comes out of it, there's no working with the president, people will notice that. And I think a lot of folks that voted with the Democrats today say, well, you know, I voted for you guys, but all I got was investigations, and there was no infrastructure bill, there was no health care bill, there was no immigration reform. So I hope that Democrats are thinking about that and thinking that I can't just talk about investigations.
We know President Trump at these rallies, including the one he held here for Ted Cruz, he said, vote as though I'm on the ballot. He wanted this to be a referendum on him.
Yes, he
did.
did.
And he got those people out. I mean, obviously, he pushed Ted Cruz over. Florida, Ron DeSantis is going to be the next governor over Andrew Gillum. What did Democrats needed to do? What do they need to do to regroup from something like that?
Yeah, I think that I think that in states like that, you know, Democrats are going to have to go back to the drawing board and see what went wrong. You know, it's unfortunate for Andrew Gillum, and I don't think George is going to go Stacey Abrams' way either. But I want to go back to a point about what Pablo said about this is a win-win for Trump. I actually disagree. I think that if I think people forget sometimes too that he's still the president and he's the leader. So when you put forth an agenda and you can't get it done, it still comes on you. This notion that the American people is just so knowledgeable about what the House can do sometimes is not true. Sometimes they just don't know. Like a lot of newly educated voters that we're trying to educate, we're trying to tell them, hey, this is how the House works. This is how the Senate works. Why can't you do this in the Senate? Why can't you do this in this House? I mean, all my friends who are just now, they've always voted in a presidential year. They've never really voted in a midterm year. Like I've had to explain to them, hey, this is why this is going on. This is why it's favorable here for him and not here. And I think that there is something to said about you being a leader and not getting your agenda done. There's a reason why a Tea Party movement happens. There's a reason why, like you said, in 1994, it happens to Bill Clinton. When you're the leader of the free world and you don't get your agenda done, it's no good. And then the other thing too is that I don't want to predict what's going to happen in 2020 because we got bit in 2016. I will say this. Those previous presidents that ran for re-election were not this disliked. I mean, there is a movement going on in this country where Trump is not sitting well with people. I mean, you're seeing this all over the country with the House.
The states that he will need to win in 2020, like Florida and Georgia, you know, his people won.
Yeah, and I think that and that's why you have 2 years. You have 2 years to go back to the drawing board and figure it out, right? And that's what Democrats will do. I mean, we've done, like I said, we just did this in Texas, put money into it, and I also think that these states, I need to go look at how they did down ballot as well, state house, if there was any competitive races, state house and stuff like that. But I think that there's a model that we can use now that we did in Texas and some of the other states, and see if we can go forth and prosper.
Let me just push back a little bit in one way, in particular way. Because I do kind of agree with Pablo more. And a couple of things. Again, just to reiterate, Trump is probably going to be willing to make deals with Democrats in ways Republicans don't want. And so he's going to get things done. And secondly, in terms of who blames whom, right? What happened wrong, and this is going back a long time, but back in 1984, one of the ways Clinton managed to make it back was he actually didn't get blamed for certain things that didn't get done. It managed to get on the Congress, and that's how that was reversed. So it isn't always true that even though he's the president,
be able to separate himself from.
He was able to separate himself, and so it actually went the other way. And another example with Trump, you know, and again, it's part of what was happening within the Republican Party. You know, when initially in the first year of Trump, back in the first part of 2017, he was not having any success with the Republicans in his own party because many people like Mitch McConnell and others were really not perceived as helping him out. Nothing was moving. But the internal polling in the Republican Party, a lot of people said, you know what? They weren't blaming Trump. They were blaming McConnell. And it was only after a lot of Republicans started seeing and noticing that it's not Trump who's getting the blame for this. It's us. That's when you started seeing all of a sudden tax reform move along. So there's a lesson in there that people are looking at you, and you can't just assume that they're going to blame the president when things don't get done. I would caution Democrats not to look at that. They may come back to you depending on how things play out.
One thing is clear, the president will never take the blame on anything, right? I mean, it's like we know that. I mean, he'll go on Twitter and say it's not my fault, and he's very effective at communicating that, so he might put some heat on Congress.
I haven't seen a tweet from him yet, but I'm sure they'll probably
he
will
was
be
out
one
already.
coming.
He was greeting the success of the Republican Party.
Right, right. I want to switch gears and go to Christina and Pablo to talk about the propositions that were on the ballot for the city of Houston. Of course, Prop A was about the drainage issues. That one, you know, went through, and then Prop B, the firefighters pay parity issue, the big one, that went through. What do you think this is going to mean politically for the mayor? How is he going to try to fight this?
So he won one and he lost one, right? I mean, that's the way to put it. I mean, it's like, so one was
But
overwhelming.
the one he lost was kind of a big one, because he's saying it's going to cost the city millions of dollars.
But the first one too, right? I mean, it's like because he needs the resources to help. I mean, one of the issues that we found, we do our survey after Harvey, is that voters want to feel that their representatives are doing something to address the issue. Even if that's not effective, they need to show that they're doing something. I mean, the Culberson story pretty much sums this up. The efforts that both the city and the county are putting into working the infrastructure projects are also pointing in that direction. They need to show that they are preparing for the next big storm, because this one hit us very, very hard. So he needed that. He needed the funds to show that he was trying to do something. The second one is going to be really hard because the resources are not there, and the mayor is going to find a very hard time deciding who to lay off once, I mean, it's like the new contract starts kicking in. And that doesn't talk about the issue whether or not the firefighters deserve it. I mean, it's like they've been complaining that they're training firefighters, but they cannot retain them because the pay is not competitive. When you compare to other districts, I mean, it's like that don't have so much pressure on them. So these are tough, I mean, decisions for him. It's an issue that hasn't been resolved, I mean, it's like by his predecessor either. So it's not going away.
Christina, what does this mean for the mayor's future politically?
I don't think it won't have any impact on the mayor. I mean, when he's up for re-election, people have forgotten about Prop B already, right? He's going to have to make cuts.
The firefighters, I mean, there's been some pretty strong arguments between the mayor's side and the firefighter side.
The firefighters didn't support him in the last election, I don't think. But the thing is, it's like, what was I going to say? I can't even remember now.
The political impact on 2020 for him?
Well, I don't think it'll have an impact on Turner, but he's just announced today that he's going to take it to court to see if it even passes. So I don't think it'll have an impact on his reelection.
Otis,
he's been a pretty popular mayor.
Your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, we didn't take a position on either proposition. I think it's very interesting. I think he's going to end up going to court and with the firefighters, and firefighters are actually big supporters of his. They block walked for him. They got out the vote. He got their endorsement. And so for them to kind of come out and be split is very interesting. And I saw that the firefighters were having a watch party and they were celebrating. So it's going to be very interesting. City's got a revenue cap. It's going to be really interesting how they play with the budget and try to get these things happen. And it's not like they still can't come together and get a deal done either. So, I mean, we'll see. I don't think it'll. I don't know how much it's going to have an effect on Mayor Turner in 2019 when he's up for re-election. It'll be interesting. It's more the Tony Busbys of the world who come out and announce that they're going to run for mayor. So it's going to be an interesting 2019 election.
You have thoughts on this from your Republican Party side?
Well, I'll tell you, a lot of Republicans were, on this one agree with, Mayor Turner. And this is one of the few areas where I think there was actually broad bipartisan support on his position, particularly because the fiscal argument was very sound. It was real. And I just don't know what the mayor could have done to try to explain to the voters the real fiscal consequences of this decision. It's a feel good to want to take care of the firefighters, but there's the fiscal realities, and I think that was a hard case for the mayor to make. I kind of agree with you. I don't think it's going to hurt him in the long run. I just don't think so.
We also had historic first for Sylvia Garcia heading to Congress from Texas. First Hispanic woman to do that. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, Congresswoman Garcia definitely pulled it out. I mean, it was a district that is gerrymandered to cater her for sure.
Replacing Jean Green.
Replacing Jean Green. Happy retirement, by the way, Congressman Green. I think Congresswoman-elect Garcia, I'm so used to calling her senator every time I see her. Congresswoman-elect Garcia is going to do a phenomenal job. She's going to be the rabble-rouser like she was in the State House. And Christina talked about this a little earlier, and I know we'll talk about it, but this is going to be a domino effect in that district now. Ana Hernandez and Carol Alvarado, who both have just won their House races. They're going to be running for her now Senate district race. We don't know when that election is going to be. Both those women are state reps, so that's going to be another domino effect. We had something similar when El Franco Lee died a couple of years ago with County Commissioner 1, then Senate District 13, and then House District 146 with Sean Theory. So it's going to be very interesting how all of that unfolds. But congratulations to Congresswoman-elect Garcia. And by technicality, Houston elected the first Latina to Congress. I know for Veronica Escobar out in El Paso, she won, but because of the time zone, we get that claim. So I keep telling her, use that because it works.
What do you guys think overall, big picture, is for what we saw play out tonight? We'll start with you, Marco.
Well, I'm going to say, you know, a lot of things turned out the way we expected. The bump for the Democrats was not quite as big. I mean, I know that Nate Silver had that little graph, and you can see it got a little down in terms of expectations. You know, I said earlier before this show to some of the friends of mine that, you know, what would be a good outcome to at least ease the divisiveness in this country? You know, and I did say that, you know, though I'm a Republican, I felt that if either side won too big, that it would not be good, because then it would validate all the rhetoric that has been used so far. I said, but if it's a divided, more even, evenly divided score, where it's all kind of mixed all over the place, it might get some reassessment as to what's a better way to reach across the borders. So that's what I would say at this point. I think it's kind of more of a mixed bag than people think it is. Obviously, it's a night for the Democrats in the House, as we expected it would be. And overall, I would say that I'm not too unhappy, because I was fearful that it could be worse, and actually it's not as bad given the midterm.
Right.
Final thoughts, Otis?
Big picture for me is that, like I said, I believe Texas is now a battleground state, and to dive in more locally into Harris County, swept all the judicial races, all the city administration races. The county judge race is still too close, I believe, to call, and Adrian Garcia and Jack Mormon are still fighting over it. One of the great things that I'm so happy about, though, is that we finally fired Stan Stannard. Voting will be better in Harris County. We will get results a lot better. But overall, good night for Democrats. We got a lot of momentum heading into the future.
Pablo, what's your big takeaway?
Big takeaway is that voters are looking for, checks and balances. They're looking at the Constitution, saying this is a place where I can have, it's like ambition pit against ambition, and hope that that leads for the best results for us. It's like as voters, and the best policies. It could be a message also that even if we, as voters, are digging into our own positions, will force our representatives to sit and bargain and compromise.
Christina?
My big takeaway is voter turnout, especially among young voters. So millennials now outnumber baby boomers, and it's important that they actually choose the leaders that are going to basically make the world that they're going to live in. So it's good. 46% is what I saw last in Texas, which is way up from our last midterm, almost presidential numbers getting close to. And once you vote once, you're more likely to vote in every election. So I think we might see these numbers continue to go up.
I do need to say something, because you mentioned Stan Stannard. And I just want to say that as somebody who has worked elections before in the past, and it's a job that Democrats and Republicans have to do,
Is it one that should even be partisan, though? Why is it partisan?
Well, there's actually good reasons for it. But working the primaries and so on. But I would say that at least in my experience in running those elections, that I have always found that the way Stan Stannard has run it has promoted a sense of respect and cooperation with opposing parties. I always felt comfortable, and I thought that, and I've never heard complaints from the way people were being treated. So it's a hard job. He's got to run. Running an election in a place this big is a humongous endeavor. And the number of people that you have to be involved, and the fact that we have so many few issues, considering how many thousands of people are involved in this process, I think is actually to his credit. I don't know what your complaints about him, but I've always found him to be good. So you mentioned him, and I just want to say that, at least from my experience, I thought he's done a good job.
That will be the last word for tonight. Thank you all so much for joining us for this special digital coverage here on clicktucson.com, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed it and have a great night.